Devils Thursday. This is the Woo Report. The Woo Report. The Morning Woo edition. Streaming live on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Twitter Live, and Twitch on the Let's Go Devils Network. Coming to you live from the bunker in an undisclosed location in beautiful New Jersey in the Primetime Radio Studios. Seeing people filing in. Max is back. Peter Seifert. It's an early morning rise. Talking Devils hockey. As you may have heard a couple days ago through Kevin Weeks, finally official, Andrew Brunette replacing John Hines in Nashville. Andrew Brunette, the associate head coach last season for the New Jersey Devils, who some believe that he would replace one day Lindy Ruff. But congratulations to Andrew Brunette for unseating John Hines, who was rumored recently that the Rangers have inquired about his services. And, I said this last night on the State of the Fan address that I just don't think it's a right fit. I mean, you go from rebuild to all in to what's happening with the New York Rangers. Who really cares at this point? Also, just want to give a big congratulations to a good friend of the podcast, James Nichols. If you haven't heard, James Nichols of the fourth period, still with the fourth period, but now signing on with New Jersey Hockey Now.com, the Hockey Now network. James Nichols, Devils beat writer, now starting to, he's starting to write some articles out, and he wrote an article out yesterday. Devils lose Andrew Brunette to Nashville Predators. Who are the potential replacements? Who are the potential replacements? And I just realized that graphic that I just put out. See, the early morning morning woo, well, made a mistake there. But that's okay. That's okay. Because I just spotted that. Anyway, on the graphic, if those listening into the card didn't know what I was talking about. Max says Sarge is taking Bruno's position. It makes sense. Love it that Max is using nicknames here. But, all right, so let's go through James Nichols' article. He had his talking about Sergei Brylin, Patrick Elias, Bruce Boudreau, Dan Bylsma, and those were his four. And out of the four, what intrigues me, now, Sergei Brylin would be deserving of it, no question. I think Patrick Elias, with virtually no experience, possibly being an assistant coach, I think that's kind of a stretch. It's not a knock on Elias, but, at this point in the franchise history, would you put Patrick Elias in that position as assistant coach? I don't think he's paid his dues yet. He does have the credentials when he was a player. Max is suggesting, or John Hines coming back in a reduced role. I don't think that would happen. Bruce Boudreau is very intriguing to me. Only because, I'm glad that James actually mentioned that, because Boudreau, 68 years old, a veteran, also appeared in the movie Slapshot, if people didn't know. Boudreau, when he coached the Wild or Canucks, has scored, and I'm going to quote James's article here. on NewJerseyHockeyNow.com that Boudreaux has coached a team, whether the Minnesota Wild or Canucks, that has scored 3 or more goals per game at 5-on-5. And the hire could give Ruff, between the two of them, the winningest coaches among active coaches. And I think that experience will help the Devils. Max is asking about Kevin Dineen with the Utica Comets. Again, I think continuity is best for the New Jersey Devils organization as a whole to keep Dineen down there, but how long can you keep Kevin Dineen down at Utica remains to be seen. Now, Dan Bylsma, interesting choice. He coached the Pittsburgh Penguins, was promoted back in 2009. Had instant success winning a cup. But since then, what has he done? He went to the Buffalo Sabres, didn't work out, and hasn't really done much since then at the NHL level. Could it work? Absolutely can, but how much more do the Devils need to do to go back to the Pittsburgh Penguins well? However, John Marino has worked out really well, by the way. Yeah, Max, and I agree with Max, and I said this last night, that Dan Bylsma's success was due to the fantastic Pittsburgh team he had, and only one cup to show for it. You can make the argument that they should have won more. Granted, Sidney Crosby at one point was having injury issues with the team. But, again, we're talking about an assistant coach. We're talking about 5-on-5, special teams. Ryan McGill manning the defense. Sergei Brylin behind the bench. Would you promote one of them? But that Patrick Elias suggestion, I'm not so sure. Sergei Brylin paid his dues. Was assistant coach in Utica. Now he's with the Devils. We shall see. What the Devils do and who will replace Andrew Brunette. Now, it was kind of expected that Andrew Brunette would field offers around the league. We talked about the rumor about the Anaheim Ducks. There's still going to be other teams vying for the head coaching position to their respective clubs. The New York Rangers taking their time with this, trying to make the right choice. And why I mention the Rangers is not because I hate the Rangers. It's because only several points separated the two, both the Devils and Rangers, in the Metropolitan Division. The Rangers went all in. The Devils got the best of them. I felt a while ago that when the whole Tom Wilson incident happened for the Rangers, it seemed like the Rangers went off script, completely ripped it up, and went from developing the young players after promising that's what they were going to do to a letter to season ticket holders, got impatient, made a nice run, but now their kid line They're not leading the team like the Devils kid line, if you want to call it that way, figuratively speaking, of Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier. They're doing much better. The Devils also have to look at the defense. Damon Severson, Ryan Graves going into free agency. Where will they be ending up? Will Simon Nemec and Luke Hughes lead the way? Does Tom Fitzgerald take the strategy of taking advantage of Nemec and Hughes' entry-level contract on the blue line? Tells you how important Brendan Smith is to this team, coming in as a 34-year-old veteran mentor. His presence is going to be invaluable. The emergence of Kevin Ball on defense, there's not much room. Nick Villano of pucksandpitchforks.com last night on the State of the Fan address alluded to, any inkling of getting Quinn Hughes to reunite the Hughes brothers from a marketing standpoint and from a player's, hockey operation standpoint would be great, but it's not necessary. Quinn Hughes is going to be in Vancouver. I don't think they're going to give him up as of now. NY Davey writes, ask Scott Stevens to be assistant coach dedicated to helping the young D-core. I think Ryan McGill has done well, but I agree with you, though, NY Davey. If you're going to go to the past and have a dedicated coach on defense, who better than Scott Stevens to help guide that young blue line? Because they're going to need it. The Devils are going to get younger on defense this upcoming season. You've got to think that Hughes and Nemec will be a pairing or will be in the top 6 in the organization. Peter Rice Stevens is a locker room guy. He was the most important part of our history. Agreed. But what happened with Scott Stevens? Does Scott Stevens want that job? But the Devils need to reach out and bring Scott Stevens back into this organization in some capacity. I'm echoing the sentiments of Bruce Zeman, a good friend of the podcast. Bruce Zeman, if you remember him, #1 morning show in Vermont, and also hockey analyst for Vox Sports, saying the same thing, that Scott Stevens needs to come back. Because I think this game is half mental, half physical, half mental. The mental side of the game, someone as tough as Scott Stevens would be awesome to bring back in the organization. And Sergei Brylin moving to where Brunette was, I got to tell you, it intrigues me. I think Brylin deserves it. He's been loyal to the New Jersey Devils from day one. That's the only organization that he's really played for and coached for at this point. And Brylin was probably one of the most underrated players in Devils history. Being part of all 3 cups, he was the interchangeable part. He was the Eric Holla of his time with the New Jersey Devils. And, I'll tell you, I really, really think that having these type of character players, I'll tell you, former players that, were part of that locker room could enhance the locker room culture of the New Jersey Devils, which I think the culture is good, by the way. You saw that in the playoffs, how the Devils reacted to the obstacles and challenges ahead. I see your comment, Max. Yes, I know all about Jet as well. Now, there's somebody that you need to trade for marketing purposes. It's that guy. Nice, speedy player, Jet Wu. Vancouver Canucks. Max also asks, as fans, should we be concerned there hasn't been a peep about Bratt or Meyer? No, not at all. It's called negotiating. This happens. It's very rare that you have an Eric Holla that just basically says, waves the white flag, all right, let's get a deal done. I want to be back. But the players, it's all negotiation. This is normal stuff. I'm not worried about it. I would be worried about it if they're unsigned by September. Yes, and the Cup finals start, I believe, this Saturday in Vegas. Can you imagine being part of the national press, booking those travel tickets, both Florida, South Florida, and Vegas? Oh, I wish I was covering that. That would be kind of cool. But replacing Andrew Brunette, there are some great candidates. If you haven't seen it yet or haven't heard, James Nichols of the Fourth Period has now signed on with NewJerseyHockeyNow.com and is just writing some articles up. Also, speaking of articles, pucksandpitchforks.com, Nick Villano says there's going to be influx of articles coming out in the next few days. He can't even keep up with the editing of these articles. Let's see. If we make the Stanley Cup Final Stand, will the Woo Jet come to life? You know what? I'll work on the Woo Jet. Also, N.Y. Davies says, loves the throwback, the first-year Brodeur 29 jersey over my right shoulder. Yes, on the camera feed. Yep, that's the Brodeur 29. Again, I remember Brodeur's. I had the chance back in 8th grade go to the Devils Boston game, which was a Thursday night, or go to the Sunday game against the Nordiques. So I got to see Brodeur's second ever game of his career. Should have been at the first, but something about I had a test on that Friday at school. Remember, I didn't have a life back in those days. And I remember those. I had Gold Circle. I was with a friend. His dad had Gold Circle season tickets back at the old Meadowlands, Brendan Byrne Arena. And I remember Devils fans like, who is this guy, Brodeur? He can't stop a beach ball if it came, or a bus if it came right at him. Boy, I wish I had like a camera back then. A camera phone back in the early 90s and recorded that. And that's how I feel about Akira Schmid, because I think Akira Schmid would be the number one goaltender going into next season. Although Vitek Vanacek may have something to say about that. N.Y. Davies says, remind everyone that Lou and Conti traded down in the draft to get Brodeur and traded the higher pick to the Flames so they could get Trevor Kidd. Yeah, and who was picked at 19? I got to look at that 1990 draft. That draft is probably, Yager was in that draft. I believe Owen Nolan was in that draft, I believe. Draft. I'm looking it up right now. And that's another podcast for another day. So when I go on my vacation to Alaska, I'm going to have a series of fake live podcasts. And, number 19 with Keith Kachuk. Keith Kachuk was actually picked at 19 right before Brodeur. And if you look at that draft, there's some. Turner Stevenson was 12th overall, won the Cup with the Devils in 2003. Yager was number 5. Keith Primo was number 4. You got some gritty players like Mike Ricci at 4th overall. Remembered Peter Nedved, Daryl Sador, Darian Hatcher, both playing for the Dallas Stars, their 99 Cup team. Trevor Kidd at 11. Some of these, but Brodeur number 20 overall. It was a good draft. It was a very good draft. But all right. Want to thank all those tuning in to the Morning Woo here on the Woo Report. Dropping the podcast in about 10, 20 minutes. Steve Engel getting drunk last weekend. Steve Engel sitting in the sin bin for about 24 hours, now back in the mix. NY Davey, thank you. R. Nunez, taking one last question here. Did you read the part of Joshua Harris' purchase of Washington Commanders? The NJ Devils and Sixers serve as collateral for loans. Any concerns? I knew it. I didn't see that. R. Nunez, you got to get a hold of me. I want to find that article because I did mention about that here on the Woo Report that I can't fathom where this money was coming from based on net worth of Joshua Harris, and he's taking a big risk here. We'll have to look into it because that concerns me because the Devils' payroll should be at the maximum. And if it does not work out in Washington, and if anybody's read the prospectus of where Joshua Harris is going to make the money with this group, yeah, I'll tell you what, that's something to be concerned about, and that's going to be something that I'll be talking about. I need to do more research on that, but thank you, R. Nunez, because it does concern me about that, because the last couple sales in the NFL, these owners literally, privately, they had the money. Joshua Harris, as loaded as he is, doesn't. He may be spread thin, and that's something to be concerned about. However, Joshua Harris is a shrewd businessman, and I'm sure he knows the risks involved. Buying the Washington Commanders also buys possibly political influence, being the geographical location of that team, which is in Washington, D.C. Something to think about. Does not surprise me. It's a risk. Will I be cheering for the Commanders? Absolutely not. Would be amazing if the Giants or Jets having success and parading around with a Super Bowl win inside the Prudential Center. Normally they make their appearance after a big win like that. Would be kind of funny. 76ers are worthless, so we're screwed. Yes, and they're trying to build an arena right now in the middle of Philadelphia. And, you know, I followed Joshua Harris in his business days at Apollo Hedge Fund. But we will talk about that at another time after I do the research on that. But thank you, R. Nunez, because that's something interesting to me. I'm a geek like that. Where's the money going to come from? The Devils have no budget, and that's what I don't want to hear. Because if that's the case, a Jack Hughes and a Nico Hischier would be pissed because they want to win cups. Not just one, but multiple. And I'm hoping Joshua Harris sees the numbers, the return on his investment when you spend all the way to the cap. Something to be concerned about? Well, let's put it this way. From what I hear, I think the Devils make more money on concerts than actually the team itself. The team itself is really the anchor of the Prudential Center. And when you've got an $80 million a year payroll to pay versus what it takes to host a concert at Prudential Center, you do the math. Anyway, enough of that business talk here on the Morning Woo, on the Woo Report. Hitting the music right now. Dropping the podcast about 10, 20 minutes for your mid-morning and afternoon commute. I think there's going to be hockey on tap tonight. We'll share it on our social media pages at Let's Go Devils Pod on Twitter, Facebook at Let's Go Devils Podcast, and our YouTube channel at Let's Go Devils. Thank you. Rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Getting out of here. Till next time, let's go Devils.